Good morning and welcome. I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, Presbyterian minister of three congregations in Eastern Ontario, and thank you for joining us for this week's children's story. This week's story is called Misty Meow. Ready for something different? Okay, so here's Misty Meow, and she's a very young kitten. She's very beautiful, and her family loved her very much, and they were very protective of her. They never let Misty go outside because they didn't want her to get hurt. No, they told her. Whenever she tried to run out the door, no, 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 no. You're a house cat. You belong inside where it's safe. Misty wasn't happy with that. Sometimes they might let her go outside in the backyard, but she was on a collar and had a leash, and she couldn't wander very far. No, they exclaimed whenever she tried to get the collar off. We don't want you to get lost. And then they bring her back inside. Oh, she got so fed up of hearing no. Yeah, she did. It's like, is there any other word in the English language? And she never listened to what they had to say. Every time they opened the door to come in or go out, she tried to sneak out. She was there listening to the outside world. She dreamed of what life would be like in the outside world, where she could roam without a collar or a leash. She dreamed about all the wonderful creatures she could meet and how no one would ever say no to her again. She decided she had to run away. One day she saw her chance. Little Kara had gone out to play, but she'd forgotten to shut the door behind her, and Misty jumped at the door and was out through it. Free, free at last. Now, Misty did see Kara and her friends, and she thought about joining them, but then she remembered if they saw her, they would put her back inside, so she ran away from them. She ran right across the street without looking. A horrible sound blared right at her. Honk! Giant thingamajig, whatever it was, just raced past her. She'd almost been killed by a car. She didn't know what cars were, but that spooked her, and she was really frightened. She started to run faster and faster, but didn't know where she was running to, and she ran into the woods near her home. It was darker there. The sun had trouble getting through. And there were all these, see them? These poles sticking up through the ground. Remember, Misty hadn't been outside much. She didn't know they were trees. Oh, she could hear other animals, but they weren't around her. None of them came near. Time passed. She was cold, hungry, lonely, and yeah, she had to go to the bathroom. But her litter box wasn't outside. She hunted for it, couldn't find it. She hunted for her food dish and her water dish, couldn't find them either. Oh, she wanted to go home, but she didn't know where home was. So she started to cry some more. And she cried very softly until she cried herself to sleep. Yes. Sometime later, it started to rain. She didn't like getting wet at all. She walked around and around in a circle, meowing, shrieking, hoping someone would hear her. Well, someone did, but she didn't know it. Rocky Raccoon was close by. Actually, he'd been watching her for a while. He could tell she was a young kitten, and she didn't belong in the woods on her own. I wonder where she lives, he asked himself. Maybe I can just take her to one of the main streets and someone in town will take her home. Maybe we'll have to figure out where her home is. Well, on saying that, he climbed down from where he'd been hiding so he could talk to her. And of course, Misty just arched her back and at him. Rocky sighed. He wanted to tell Misty that, well, it was okay. She didn't have to be afraid and to follow him to the edge of the woods. But it wasn't going to be easy. For one thing, she was scared. And she had good reason to be scared. She didn't know him. She didn't know he was a friendly raccoon. And unfortunately, Rocky didn't know cat. He didn't know the language. But still, he stayed by her and he talked to her and he even tried to share some food with her, some fish that he had. She didn't take it, but eventually Misty calmed down enough to say, I just want to go home. Well, of course, Rocky didn't understand that either because she was speaking cat language, but Rocky figured it out. And so he sort of led the way to the woods. Come on, come follow me. And Misty didn't because she didn't understand raccoon. But eventually they sort of communicated and she followed him. And then she saw she was at the edge of the woods. Yay. But where was home? She started to cry again. Okay. So Rocky took a deep breath and just said, kept, follow me. And they started wandering around town. Is this your home? Does this look familiar? But of course, she'd never been out much, so she didn't recognize anything. And then she saw it. Something she thought she recognized. The front yard. She'd only seen it that one time when she ran out, but it looked like home. It smelled like home. So she started meowing like crazy and ran towards the house. But when she turned around to see, to thank Rocky, he was gone. It was like, okay, you're home. And he was headed back to his home in the woods. And just then the front door opened and Kara came running out and, well, Misty just jumped past Kara and ran straight to the litter box. Safe at home, safe at last, surrounded by friends and family. But first things first. I hope you enjoyed the story. Poor Misty. I'm glad she got home, but I'm sorry she suffered so much because she couldn't find her litter box or food dish or water dish in the woods. She was sort of silly, wasn't she? I mean, she was outside. She could have used the trees. It was raining. She could have drunk the water from the rain. Rocky had given her a fish or tried to give her a fish. That would have been food. Just because it wasn't in her dish, well, she didn't take advantage of the things around her, and that's sort of what made her a silly cat. I guess. Sorry, I said corrected, a silly kitten. I think Misty's a bit like all of us. Yeah, you are. All of us, I think we want some adventure in our lives, but not too much. We want to try new things, but we also want to keep the old things around, and that's okay. It's okay to have good feelings and bad feelings at the same time, to be excited and to be scared at the same time. That's sort of normal. And sometimes God pulls us in new directions and he surrounds us with all sorts of possibilities and blessings, but we don't see it at the time because we're busy looking the other way. We're looking backwards at what we had when we were comfortable. Well, I'm glad Misty made it home where she's safe. But at the same time, I wish she could have seen some of those opportunities. She could have recognized she was on an adventure. And there were things there that could have made her excited and happy. And maybe she wouldn't have been quite so scared. Maybe that's the secret we all need, to sort of stop and look around and see where we can find God or God's presence in our own lives, wherever we are and whatever we're doing. So that's our story for today and our lesson. Let's close with prayer. Dear God, Dear Jesus, sometimes we're not happy with what we have. We want more. We want something different. We want what we think everyone else has. Help us to know what's really important, the miracle of families and friends that you've given us. And help us to see the wonders of life, the beauty of the world around us, the adventures, the opportunities, the blessings you're giving us and where you're calling us to. Thank you for all our gifts. And thank you for just being you. Amen. Amen. Take care. Once again, I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, Presbyterian minister of 3 congregations in Eastern Ontario. Thank you for joining Misty and I for this week's children's story, and see you next week. Take care and God bless.